Hi, folks, and welcome to another Engage.
You beat me to it. I was
Saturday morning Samoflange. You're going to be engaged.
Make it so.
Make it so. You're going to make it, and Benjamin's going to make it so because a few weeks ago, you finished the Patrick. You told me you were reading.
I told you all about Patrick Stewart's new memoir called "Make It So." Which, man, I wish I could do that. Like, what a perfect voice he has. He was just born to do that. Such a great orator, I should say. And so one of the best parts of listening to or reading this book was listening to it and listening to Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard himself and Professor Xavier himself and Hamlet himself and everybody else himself tell you his life story. And it was terrific. It's one of the best books I've read all year, without question. And it was just so mesmerizing from start to finish. And I tried to tell you about it. I think, what were we doing? We were playing board games or something that night. And then I just launched into the story.
I think it was after a podcast you had told me about this.
I think we just couldn't stop talking because this is the reason that we do Saturday Morning Samoflange is because a lot of our conversations are just, they carry on.
Well, then I told you not to stop talking because I said, let's do a podcast about it when you finish, and you finish it next week.
I finished it quick, and I was so sad. I could have listened to it for another week.
I'm so interested in this, so
I think you would love it. And I know that you're not the biggest audiobook person, I don't believe.
No, I'm not, but I do like me some autobiographies. But
and I think that this would qualify as a good exception to the typical rule for anybody who prefers the physical copies of books. Because there aren't that many audiobooks that I would recommend over the physical copy if you like to read. To physically hold a book, I totally understand that love and passion. This one primarily probably because of his voice, but no, that's secondary. His voice is terrific, but the primary reason that you would want to listen to this book instead of reading it is because of all the subtle inflections that he puts on the very specific words that give the page would not have as much meaning, because he gives so much nuance as he's telling his own story as he would to a real character or a character that he's playing on TV. So his real character, his real life, has so much depth in the delivery and the way that he expresses these sometimes heartbreaking stories, his struggle, growing up and becoming an actor, and through Star Trek and through X-Men and his life now and the heartbreak that he's gone through and the successes he's had. Anytime you're talking about the biggest moments of his 90-year-old life, like he's getting up into the 80s and 90s, 80s, you have a lot of big moments. And the famous person, he's got a lot of stories that people want to hear about. And he just delivers every chapter with beautiful nuance and emotion and honesty. And you cannot help but really feel like he is sitting next to you telling you this story about this thing that really happened to him. Yeah. And it's terrific because so many authors and narrators, professional narrators too, you can tell when they get caught up and just, all right, let me just read this copy and get it recorded, and then we can just spit it out there. I was talking during our Thanksgiving episode about being a voice actor for the annual compliance training at my job.
Yes.
And, oh my Lanta, talk about wanting to just squeeze your head until it explodes sometimes. Because you know what I'm talking about. You must have to do a lot of annual training and stuff like that. And you can just hear people talking about their Visa cards. And the Pro FX microphone that I'm using right now has 2,000 microphone buttons and all this. Like, it's just... It's so mind-numbing.
All the time.
It's mind-numbing. People fall into a natural, relaxed cadence like that because it requires no effort, no work, no thought, and it's simple. And honestly, most people are just afraid of performing. And, that's one of my favorite Jerry Seinfeld jokes is number one fear of most people is speaking in public. Number one. Number two is death. Number two! Which means that most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And anytime I tell that joke to people who are somewhat shy, they all say, I agree. I
would rather be dead than being up there.
I'd rather be dead.
Yeah, and that's a common thing, I think, for most people. And Patrick Stewart just doesn't have that, and neither do I. And it was so beautiful to listen to him tell his story. It was fun because I felt like I was living vicariously through his experience in some ways.
That's awesome.
Now, I cannot at all relate to his upbringing and how he grew up in Northern England, working class, like dirt poor kind of thing, just a hovel of a house.
Right.
And no bathroom, no indoor plumbing, had an outhouse for I think the first 13 years of his life or something like that. I mean, and he said he would read since he was 5 years old. And the only place he could have to read, because it was just one room, the whole family in one room with a fireplace in the middle of the house, I think, and just nowhere to go for privacy because the bathroom is the only place. So that's where he would read. And in the freezing cold northern England, he would take his book out with a candle into the outhouse.
That's love.
And
That's
sit
love
there
reading.
and read to get away from, escape his poor life and whatever else, and to be transfixed by the stories that he read and create these characters in his head. And it was just terrific for him to share all of those wonderful stories. Now, none of that I can relate to. He grew up so poor, working class. He talks about his Yorkshire accent and stuff because it's a whole other, it's the English language, but Yorkshire in particular has an entirely different dialect with entirely different words that are entirely unintelligible unless you have been there and know what they're talking about. And he gives a lot of really cool examples. He said something like, he broke down this one moment where if you were going to go to your buddy's house and you wanted to come out and play, the classic, can Billy come out and play?
Yeah, knock on the door. Hey, Mom.
If you did that, like they would go up to Billy's house and they would knock on the door and then the mom would answer. And then he broke down the Yorkshire version of Can Billy Come Out to Play, which was like, not at all. It doesn't sound at all. It's like, like, what? It was just so...
Wow.
It was cool, but he broke it down syllable by syllable. Here's what we say. This is what it sounds like.
Always the teacher.
It comes from the old English word from the 1300s for this, like an old word for something else, and then that's why we say that. And it was just terrific. And so he went through that whole process. He... talks about how he basically accidentally fell into acting but back then when he was a kid growing up in England, the government had acting was kind of a way of life. Nowadays, especially in the States and in our generation, if you meet someone who says, "Oh, I'm an actor," it's kind of like, "Wow, really?
Yeah, that's unique.
That's cool. That's kind of unique." In England, in his time, "Oh, I'm an actor." It's like people had heard of that.
Yeah, that was quite common. You'd see people did something.
There were lots of government subsidies. There were whole schools sponsored by the government that were acting schools. Everybody kind of knew somebody who my cousin Billy was an actor, or lived that life and stuff. It was supported by the government. And that lasted up into the 80s or so with Margaret Thatcher, and she's the one who did away with a lot of that. But the point is that a lot of the great historical theater that we think about, like Shakespeare and the big acting greats that come from England, they grew up with a supported lifestyle of being able to do it. So when he was younger, I forget how old he was, but someone pitched it to him, and he's like, "Oh, no, that's not for kids like me. I'm just like the rough and tumble, whatever." But then he was actually good at it and succeeded pretty quickly and got started off, got off to a great start and had something, and people recognized it in him and kept encouraging it in him. And then he just found the right people, and he did the work and got into repertory theater, which this blew my mind. I didn't know this about. Do you know what repertory theater is? Rep theater? Essentially, at least back then too, I don't know if this is the way it is today, but they would every week get a new script, learn, read, perform, rehearse, everything, and then 1 week later perform the show Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they closed the show, had 1 day to rest, and then got your new script on Monday. You learned it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You performed it that weekend, and then you got a new show. So by the end of the month, you had performed 4 new shows in rep theater, repertory theater. That's what that was.
Man.
And then, if you were good enough in rep,
that is hardcore.
Then you would graduate to fortnight theater, rep theater. So then you had 2 whole weeks to learn your character and to put on a new play. And, once you've been spending months in rep theater, you're like, dang, I got twice the amount of time. This is going to be the greatest character I've ever done.
Because you got plenty of time to do this one.
Plenty of time to figure this out. And that's how that was the layers and the graduate level. And so he talks a lot about how you start in rep theater, and then you move to twice a week rep. Then you move up to monthly rep. So you're doing 1 play a month. Imagine that even today. We can't do one play a month here.
No, not here.
No. I mean, I have been. Okay, I mean,
that's like that. You're living, breathing, eating.
Exactly. I've been thrust into parts like as a substitute. So and so dropped out. Can you do this part on short notice? And I have learned and performed,
which happens.
Theater like on I think 2.5 weeks is my record for like a main part, like with a lot of speaking lines. Mm-hmm. I did a play with 2.5 weeks of notice and was one of the leads or the main role, and that's my all-time record. And I was very proud of that until I read this book.
That's what fast tracking a show is.
That's fast tracking a show to us over here, or at least nowadays.
That's kind of, and you got to have a really. I mean, that's like churn and burn. There's no way to.
No, what a way to live.
No breaks or anything.
No,
that's
you had one day,
insane.
basically. But even that one day off, quote unquote, you still had your new script and you're still churning along to the next one. And it's just, you might physically rest or something, and take some time, but that's it.
But at the same time, yeah.
So you put in your work, you do that, you get up to monthly rep, and then eventually, if you're good enough, you can get to regional theater. And then regional theater, you've got a general normal amount of time, a few months to prep something, get on something good. And then you move from regional theater up to, like, not quite the Royal Shakespeare Company. I forget where it was. Whoever the Royal Shakespeare Company's biggest rival is, on the West End or something like that. I'm butchering it, but I'm not. I've never been to England, so I can't say. I learned all of this from the book, and it's terrific. Like, if you have any interest in theater or acting at all, or how it works and the history of it in Shakespeare, especially because it's such a great history over there, he delves into so much of what theater was like, is like, and how it's performed and appreciated, and what the life is like of an English stage actor over there. And I have such a newfound respect for all the people in the Royal Shakespeare Company and in those rep theaters and things like that. It's just, it's unbelievable, the stuff that they do. So he fell in with this group, thrived in it, and then got a big break on like a world tour with, what's the actress? Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind.
Okay. Yeah.
Shucks.
Yeah. No, that's her. So, that's her. Yeah.
Whatever her name is, who I can't remember at the moment, but she was, older, and the movie was being re-released because back in the day they used to have a big re-release for the super blockbuster movies. Like Gone with the Wind, that always made a lot of money. So they would re-release it with a new poster, and it would suddenly be out because you didn't have VHS and you didn't have DVD. Mm-hmm. And so the only way to see Gone with the Wind again, or for a new generation, was to re-release the movie. Right. And then they would get the stars who were still alive to go out and publicize it, and they would get a small cut to go out and redo it. And then that's how they got their money, was just from ticket sales. So, like, totally different world.
Yeah.
But
home video didn't exist back then.
But also, when you're famous, like she was, one of the most popular movies ever made at the time, and so she got her pick kind of what play do you want to do and what parts would you like to play. Kind of like when Daniel Radcliffe finished Harry Potter. They were like, "Hey, do you want to come to Broadway and sell a bunch of tickets for any show you want to do ever? Because we know that we're going to sell out because you're Harry Potter." And that's how he did Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. That's how he did How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And he got to do Equus and so many other shows, and he did really, really well, actually. But he got those parts because he was already super world famous. So, Gone with the Wind. Oh, for crying out loud, it's going to bug me. Somebody look it up for me before I finish.
It's Scarlett O'Hara.
Yeah, okay. So, Scarlett O'Hara was on a world tour of a play, and he got invited to be a part of that. And so he got to travel all around the world, go to Australia, and have all these great stories he gets to tell about.
Vivian Lee.
Vivian Lee. Okay, that's what it was. And it's important. And the reason I wanted to know is because Vivian Lee's a superstar at the time. One of the biggest stars that's ever graced the silver screen. And she was a good actress and, near the end of her life and right before she got really sick and everything else. But he got to experience that with her. And there was a cool... there's a great, one of my favorite stories in the whole thing is I forget which play they were doing, but there's a moment when they had to be center stage. And it was the room would enclose around them, but they couldn't just get up and leave. And so they had to sit there in center stage while the rest of the play happened until the scene ended or until their next bit when they came out of the box or whatever they were sitting in. But essentially, they were on stage in a closed box together, and they had nothing to do for like half an hour or 20 minutes. So Vivian Lee would sit and turn to Patrick Stewart, little young 20-year-old Patrick Stewart, and he would just sit and chat with one of the biggest stars in the world for like 25 minutes every day. And
really
just
cool.
have his own personal one-on-one time with Vivien Leigh. And they got to be really close and such good friends, and they have so many good stories. Little stories like that are just... How cool, who would be a huge star today that you would like to be trapped in a box with for 30 minutes?
I don't know, but that'd be awesome.
It'd be a long list of people.
Yeah, there'd be a long list of people you'd want to see.
Yeah. It was just so terrific to listen to those insider things like that. And so he finally graduates up to not the Royal Shakespeare Company, but the other one, and which says a lot probably. And
yeah,
if he were to listen to this, he would probably laugh because of what I said, because it's such a rivalry.
The other one,
the other one,
the other one.
And I feel bad about it, but when he's doing these plays, he wasn't the lead part, because that's hard to get. He made it, gets paid an absurd amount of money compared to what he was getting, because he grew up, like I said, dirt poor, outhouse, one fireplace in the middle of the room that everybody slept around kind of thing, and you had to anyway, he was very poor. And then he's like, so come to the Royal Shakespeare Company. Oh, great, thank you. And he's reading the contract. What part am I going to play? And it says, as cast, which in theater terms means, as cast means you're in the show, but you don't really have a part. We'll put you where we want to put you. So it's like you're an extra, and we're just going to do whatever we want with you. So just calm down. You might have lines, you might not. And of course, every actor wants lines. Well, most actors want lines and want to be a part of it. So part of him was kind of heartbroken. He's like, oh man, as cast, I've been doing kind of leading parts and getting bigger stuff. And then he looked at his paycheck. He's like, what? You want to pay me this much for as cast? And so all he had to do was jaunt around the world with Vivien Leigh and hang out as
fantastic
cast. And just dream job, being in Australia, traveling the world, hanging out with his new friends, and just living the dream. And it was just such a terrific little fantasy for me personally as an actor, because I would imagine whoever the biggest superstar I could do with, and then you're getting paid more money than you've ever seen in your life just to do your job and hang out and to sweep the stage every so often and show up in costume and on time. That's it. And just live your life. And so those kinds of things are terrific, but I say all of that to talk about how the first two-thirds of the book is really just about his experience on stage and acting, because that's how he came to Star Trek, which we all know him from, is as Patrick Stewart, the captain of the Enterprise, Jean-Luc Picard. But to get there, he had to pay his dues for real, and had an abusive father, terrible childhood, all these terrible things that happened in him, and he pushed through it. He knew he wanted to be an actor at, I think, 12 or 13. He was like, I'm doing this no matter what. And all the obstacles and the people that told him no, and all the jobs he had that weren't acting, and all the bad crap acting jobs he got, the bad roles that he just I'm fine, I'll do it. And he did it. And he pushed through all the bad stuff about it and built his way up. Literally went from rep theater to twice a week rep, and the monthly to regional to the Royal Shakespeare Company. So he comes out there, he's finally made it to the big time. And he comes out of his dressing room, or where the fans wait for you for an autograph, and he was the first one out, because he was done, because he didn't have a big part, or he was finished early. He comes out first, and all these girls and fans come rushing at him with pencils and a autograph pad, and then he tells this great story about how vivid he remembers this girl's face, where she thrust the pad in his face, says, "Wait, can you sign this for me?" And then he went to kind of reach for it, and then she pulled it back real quick. And then she says, "Wait a minute, are you anybody?" And then
shut up. She was just
like, he came out of the backstage. He must be a theater actor.
He must be a big one.
He must be something. And then he smiled and shook his head. He's like, no, I'm not really. And then she just moved on, went to the next person coming out the door. And so
missed out.
Exactly. And so he says that. Wow. I wonder who that girl was. And if I could show her today.
Yeah, she won't remember it. She won't remember, but now she would definitely regret
exactly. And so that was kind of the crux of it, is are you anybody?
I love that.
And then he finally got to smile about it as he's recording his memoir and say, "Yep, I am.
I'm that guy."
And
I'm that guy that you passed up.
It took well into his 40s, and I think well into maybe his 50s, but once he was already established fully as Captain Jean-Luc Picard, that he finally admitted to himself, and he's like, you know what? this is kind of great. I really like being liked. So yeah, I am
dig
somebody now. Yeah, I'm totally into this now because he was doing the grind, and he was like, I don't deserve this, and I'm gonna do all my lines, and he does go through. Eventually, once he gets to Star Trek, he talks about a lot of the stories that Star Trek fans have heard from the legendary accounts or from Star Trek conventions or something
people
like that.
have heard a million times.
Exactly. So he tells, what I liked about it is that he prefaced, this is my definitive version of what happened. I don't care what Brent Spiner says at any convention ever.
That's funny.
This is
the actual story.
Right.
Fight me.
Apparently, Brent Spiner and Jonathan Frakes, they're big jokesters and everything. They like to pull pranks and tell stories and to lie a lot about what happened.
And lies.
So he prefaced it all with, this is what happened. Do with it what you will. This is my version, officially, in canon writing. And so he tells the classic story about how in season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation, he gathered everybody together because they were all joking and having a good time. It was like a late night, and the crew was having to reset every time that somebody broke or told a joke, and then they were there till like 3 a.m. And so Patrick Stewart felt terrible because he's looking around at all the crew, and it's like, oh, well, you guys just get the lines right, because this is, remember, rep theater, you learn all of your lines in a week. Twice a week rep, that. All your monthly rep, like all of his 40 years of that harsh, strict theater training, you don't screw up your lines and make everybody else wait. That's
right.
Imagine doing that for decades.
And it's like it was written in stone.
Yeah.
That was the law for him. So for anyone to not do that is just unheard of.
And people come in, if they don't know their lines, you're out, bro. Like, you're fired. Go home.
Exactly.
We don't, there's plenty of people who will replace you if you're not going to learn your lines.
Exactly.
We got the next one up.
Exactly.
So imagine doing that for 20 years, and then he comes in, and then everyone in TNG was from a different walk of life. So no one else was from the Royal Shakespeare Company on Star Trek. It was, Brent Spiner came from a different place, and Frakes and Worf, and all of them came from different backgrounds and acting stories. And he says that that's one of the reasons that he feels like that crew was so successful as a crew, because very Star Trek-esque. Everybody had a really, every character had a genuinely different background, but also every actor had a very genuinely different background of how they made it to Paramount Studios and filmed TNG, and that's what he thinks lent a lot of the diversity and the good crew, because they all they all had entirely different backgrounds and stuff, and that was really fun to listen to as well, because you've heard that or you've read an IMDb trivia thing, but he goes into a lot of detail about why it mattered that these people came from this everything else, and so he pulls everybody in at the end of season 1 with his Shakespeare background, and as the captain feels like he has a responsibility to
lead the team.
Hey, let's go and get this together. And so the big funny story that he tells at a lot of Star Trek conventions is he banged his fist on the table and he's like, "We are not here to have fun," because Denise Crosby had said, "Oh, come on, lighten up, Patrick. We got to have a little fun every once in a while." And he's like, "We're not here to have fun." And then everybody just kind of took a beat. And then they all started laughing, and then he just storms out, just left, went to his trailer, said, "Screw this guy, I hate this, I'm going home." And then a few minutes later, Brent Spiner and Jonathan Frakes, who were the constant jokesters, they came and knocked on the door, and they were telling him, like, "Look, we're sorry, you're right, we were out of line, and, but also you kind of need to loosen up a little bit. This is America, and this is how we do it, and da-da-da-da-da." And so they became close
and that's
friends,
the best
and
way to diffuse a situation like that. So I'm glad they have
They did a face-to-face, one-on-one. Look, here we are. Let's talk. I made a mistake. You made a mistake. Let's just sort through it. And they were fine after that. And they were. And it was terrific. And so there's some of his dearest friends today still. And that's just so, it's wonderful to hear and listen to and to hear it in his own words kind of thing. And one of the things that I didn't know, speaking of TNG, was he and Ian McKellen had known each other, like they were both in the Royal Shakespeare Company, but didn't actually perform together. They were just around each other.
Each other a lot. They're missing each other.
They missed each other, different shows.
Yeah, got it.
But he knew him, and when TNG was offered, he called him or met him or he ran into him, I don't remember, but either way, he was having lunch with Ian McKellen, and he started telling him about this show. It's called Star Trek, and it's science fiction. Ian McKellen just leaps up, grabs his arm, says, "No, Patrick, don't do it. Don't go into TV. Stay in the theater where you belong." And like,
wow.
Gandalf tried to talk Patrick Stewart out.
Thou shalt not pass into the TV realm.
Right, and so he says that that's one of the few times that Ian McKellen's ever been wrong about something, because he almost talked him out of it, or he tried to talk him out of taking the part. Because Ian McKellen had been around enough to see other actors try to go off and make it in movies or TV, and then they lose their skills or they get caught up in something in Hollywood or whatever. But for whatever reasons, he tried to talk him out of it, because they're big theater people. That's what it's all about for them. And then,
of course,
the joy of meeting him again and being able to work with him again in X-Men and having him as the primary villain. And then eventually, once all the X-Men movies wrapped and they got to do Waiting for Godot together in New York and have a hugely successful run of Samuel Beckett play, crazy famous stuff they got to do. Oh, they're just such genius actors, and they can do so much with such good content. And so to hear him tell stories like that, and then because we only know them as Professor X and Magneto,
we don't know him as anything else.
Not
You're correct.
anything else.
You're correct.
And so to hear the alternate versions of those timelines and to put it in Marvel terms is just so good. And such a joy, because you can hear, that's what I was saying at the beginning of this episode, is that he has such a joy, and you can hear when he's smiling in the audiobook. You can hear when he has a genuine, oh, let me tell you about this great moment.
This was awesome.
And, this was awesome. And then you can't get that from the page. You probably could, but you really get another layer of joy and depth from him telling you exactly where the inflection in the word and the sentence needs to be, because he expresses it so well. Even things like his friendships, like with Ian McKellen. And sticking with TNG for a second, like a lot of people's favorite episode, definitely one of mine, is the There Are Four Lights episode, where he gets captured by the Cardassians and gets tortured for a while by David Warner, who's a Cardassian. David Warner, also huge Royal Shakespeare actor, and incredibly good actor that Patrick Stewart looked up to for years. He's like, oh my God, this guy's the real deal. And then didn't get to work with him, I don't think. Maybe he did like one play with him when he was still like a as cast non-speaking actor, and got to like marvel from afar of David Warner. And then did you know that episode, and I did know this, but a lot of people don't realize that David Warner, who was the Cardassian interrogator, he wasn't supposed to be in that episode, and that they called him.
You told me this.
I told
you told me
story.
this, yeah.
And this was amazing to me, because I knew that David Warner was a Shakespearean actor and really good, but he had been called either that day or the day before, and had been given the script just hours before they were filming that scene. And the vast majority, if not all, of his lines when he's interrogating Picard, and they've got this great back and forth happening about there are four lights. No, there are only three, and let me torture you because you're a Federation spy and all this.
A lot of people say it's one of the best episodes.
David Warner is reading almost all of his lines on cue cards behind Patrick Stewart.
That's incredible.
And if you look really closely, you can see his eyes moving from time to time.
Really?
If you were looking for it, you can see him reading the cue cards.
Wow.
But the way they lit it, the way that it was shot, the angles they used, there's only a handful of times that you can even barely tell that he's reading those cue cards.
Wow.
And it's only because I knew the story. Otherwise, you're so caught up in how good
how good the
acting is. It's so incredible.
But I thought for a moment I really did see 4.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
It's
and
great.
then to think about Patrick Stewart, the actor, doing that heavy acting dialogue with someone he worshipped and admired on the Royal Shakespeare stage 20 years earlier, and just looked up to him like, oh wow, this guy's really good. And now they get to do their own scenes together, and Patrick Stewart is the captain, and then he's the Cardassian. Oh, it was just such a terrific, and you can hear all the joy and the pride in Patrick Stewart's voice. It's like, wow, this was really good. Let me tell you about it. And it's just, you get to share it with him. Every joy and success that he has, you really feel like, wow, that was part of my story too. Like you almost feel like you did it at the end of the chapter because of the success and the satisfaction. That's the word I'm looking for. And then he gets to close the chapter however he wants. It's his story after all, and so he gets to tell it definitively, just like the "We are not here to have fun" story. Everything that he tells, like, this is my story, this is how it went down, and this is it. And so now you know. And then you move on to the next one, and it was great.
That's awesome.
And I think let's see, Ian Holm was his idol. So Bilbo Baggins from the Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
Ian Holm, big time Royal Shakespeare Company actor. He was Patrick Stewart's absolute number one best actor I've ever seen in my life when he was a kid. And getting into the regional theaters and stuff, it was his idol as far as acting goes. And he got to be around Ian Holm and watch him definitely from like, wow, this guy is really good, knows his stuff. Eventually, he got to do The Iceman Cometh with Ian Holm, and Ian Holm was playing the lead part. And Iceman Cometh, I don't know if you know, but is a gigantically long, wordy play. And, I mean, you talk about memorizing a whole play in a week or 2 weeks or a month. This show is off the charts wordy. Like, nothing compares. Wow. You don't ever want to go see The Iceman Cometh. Okay, it's like a huge, it's hours long epic of people chit-chat and wordy. It's worthy of great theater, but wow, today it's a struggle to get through. And so Ian Holm shows up day one of rehearsals. Yeah. Has almost all of the first half of The Iceman Cometh completely memorized and off book. Everybody else is just like, oh no, I don't even know my 3 or 4 lines or whatever, half of it. And Ian Holm had all of it. And then by the end of the first week, he had the entire show.
Incredible.
I mean, hours and hours and hours of dialogue. One of the best, or one of the biggest accomplishments that I'm proud of is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is another wordy comedy. Or Iceman Cometh's not a comedy, but anyway,
I know what you mean.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is incredibly wordy. It's essentially about 2 people, and it's about
it's a tough show to do.
3 hours long. And I'm not scared of any script because of that. Iceman Cometh makes that look like child's play.
Wow.
It's insane. It's really just a crazy. So anyway, he packs all this knowledge and information into his head, Ian Holm does. Mm-hmm. And then opening night comes, or rather a week before opening, and Ian Holm starts to lose it. He's like suddenly dropping lines, and he's missing cues. He doesn't know where he is sometimes, and they're thinking, what's happening? Like, dude's been crushing it for weeks now, and now we're like a week away, and we don't have time to replace him. Yeah. And he's Ian Holm. So, like, maybe he just needs to, take a break or something like that. I don't know. He didn't get to take a break. He's like, fine, blah, blah, blah. They go through all this ordeal, get to opening night. Ian Holm comes out for the opening bit. He says one line, boom, completely gone, has a total breakdown. And Patrick Stewart is close enough to hear him mutter to himself, it's no good. It's no good. And then that's it. And they had to finish the show somehow. I don't know what they did or if they brought in somebody else, but Ian Holm completely cracked and couldn't do it and completely lost all of his memory and concentration.
It's scary.
Didn't go back to the stage for years and years. Eventually, after that happened, he got Bilbo Baggins and, of course, made all the great Lord of the Rings stuff and everything, and was a very successul movie actor for years after that. And eventually, after the movie acting stuff, he went back to the stage, and he did very successfully come back, did another big part, crushed it, and was back to his old form, but just had the breakdown the infamous,
that's crazy,
he had a breakdown thing. But this book isn't a story about Ian Holm, but it's packed completely full of moments like, wow, you could have never heard that from someone else. And that story is so unique to Patrick Stewart's experience because he was standing right there to hear Ian Holm mutter to himself, it's no good. And those tiny details that are just perfectly suited to one person's individual life, that is their story, that is actually interesting and worthy of retelling. It's not just a catalog of... In 1956, I did
this.
It's not one page.
It's full of unique stories like
Every
this.
page of this book is packed with stories like that.
And let me ask you this. Can we come back for a part 2?
No.
Yes, we can.
We don't need a part 2.
You got plenty.
Oh, for crying out loud.
You got plenty.
Maybe next Saturday.
Morning.
Samoflange.